How you guys doing today?
I'm doing
Doing
good.
great.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask you guys about Huck Finn. I kind of love the way it serves as like a through line for this show, and I was wondering if either of you guys had like a special relationship with it before filming.
Um,
Huckleberry Finn,
Tom Sawyer rather.
the character.
the character.
So yeah, Gus did have the so-called Book of Huckleberry Finn. I never really read them before I filmed the series, and I still haven't. So I mean, I will leave the question to Nonso.
Well, I guess like the adventurer, like the that kind of wanderer in the wilderness. I feel like it has some relevance, and obviously there's the through line of him discovering, himself and discovering who he is through what he does out there in the world. So it's an interesting. I think the great thing about Sweet Tooth is that it stands on its own and lets people draw their own conclusions from what they get from it. Some people they pull out something about Tom Sawyer. Some people pull out messages about hope and how we treat the outsider. And it's it's a cornucopia of things that anybody watching Sweet Tooth can come away with something different.
Totally. It's a very dense show. And one thing, it's so visually captivating. I wanted to ask both of you guys, maybe Christian first, what was your favorite set to film on out of all the crazy locations?
So the first day I went to film Sweet Tooth. This was back in 2019 when we were filming the pilot. It was a scene where well, it's actually, in fact, the last scene of episode one. That's the first scene that we filmed. I'm running across a mountaintop, and then I go to this 3,000-foot cliff with a big drop. And that was definitely one of my favorite sets to film because it's so beautiful and surreal. It's like it looks even like CGI. It doesn't even look like it's on this planet. It looks so real and amazing. That
Mm.
is that was definitely one of my favorite sets to film on for sure, for sure.
Awesome. Nonso?
Yeah, I would say the South Island in New Zealand is just beautiful. It's beautiful. You feel like you've gone back in time before human beings had ever touched the earth, and there are like shards of rock just shooting up in formations that you don't normally see anywhere else in the world, and fauna and trees that I've never seen. There's a beautiful scene in the second episode where we're walking through this field of yellow flowers that I was like, what are these? I've never seen these before. And it's just a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place to film.
That's awesome. I just want to sneak one in here. Nonso, I'm a really big Game of Thrones fan, and I was wondering if you had seen the ending. Do you have a general reaction to it that hasn't been
Everybody
shared?
asked. Everybody asked that. No,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody. Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones, and I think with Sweet Tooth, it offers something that hopefully we get a new kind of ending that makes up for that one.
I love that answer. Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask if anything about the fan reaction to the show has surprised you guys so far.
I think it's always surreal to get any kind of amazing reaction. We knew that we were making something special, but you just never know how people are going to react or take it. And it's so humbling. It's so incredible. It's so warming. It doesn't really
It's been
get
a great
old.
welcome. It's been a great welcome, and I don't think anybody's really ever prepared for anything to be this magical and to be a part of making it. It was just a beautiful journey, but now to know that we have touched people's souls and that people are not only watching it with their families, watching them by themselves, is sharing it with other people, and I know that the message is really beautiful. So it's just yeah, it's a little bit surreal, and I'm just excited and honored to be a part of telling this story.
I think it's really interesting that you guys got paired together for this press day. Because your characters they really are kind of like the standouts of the season. Dania, I wanted to ask you if there's like a lot of pressure involved in being like kind of the most hopeful character, the most hopeful storyline in a pretty dark show. Did you feel that?
Uh, I tried to just I approached this role very differently than I have approached any other role in my career. I literally would be in my room and just meditate before I even went on set, and I try to keep that my way away from everything that was going on around me, because I wanted to be in the most pure place possible. And I think because of that, I didn't really, if I thought about it, I would have felt pressure. So I just try to kind of go day by day. There was also a lot of things going on in real life, like in reality, like the pandemic was happening. I was away from my family and my children. So I just tried to think, just like Amy, like if I was in these kinds of situations, what would I want to pass forward? And I'm already an optimistic kind of person. So, I just try to show a part of me. I think it's more stressful afterwards. Like once you're done with the job and, you kind of leave it in somebody else's hands, like, what is it going to end up being like? I hope that I really came through. And it was just been really beautiful to see. Same with Stefania and her character, that we got to play these 3-dimensional, really strong women, but also got to be really for my character, be really hopeful in like, this could be a new beginning. And more than pressure, I think it was just a beautiful journey.
Yeah. And Dania, you're really like, how you describe Amy. It feels like I know for me, you gave me so much hope through like being with you and talking with you. And even though we were in this weird, dark time, you see the wider picture and have taught me so much about how to look at things. And so I think there's a lot of similarities with Amy and you, and how you, that peacefulness with what is, and the hopefulness of like what's to come.
That's so nice. Well, Stefania, along the same lines, I was going to ask you about, you're basically playing like the closest thing this show has to like a hero in the classical like fantasy sense. Did you kind of know that while you were going at it? Did it change your perspective at all?
Well, before we even started filming, I went and did a fitting with Amanda, the head of costume. And I saw my face digitally put on all these costumes. So they prepared all the costumes before we even entered the room. And she did it for every character. But I saw the bear suit and I just was floored, and I was so moved by what she had created. And as soon as I put that costume on, I knew that I was playing a warrior, and I knew from the scripts too, but I feel like the costumes for me really made me step into that power. And so, when we started filming and I had that costume on and I had this army, it was very surreal. And it really only hit me until I had that the bear suit on and I was standing in her shoes. But it's an honor to play a warrior superhero.
That's really cool.
She's
she
amazing.
is a superhero, man.
She's amazing. She's amazing. And so are you, Stefania. Like the warrior in you, it's just so beautiful.
Thank you guys so much for your time today. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Has anything surprised you about the fan response to Sweet Tooth so far?
I suppose I sort of felt that it was something very special, and I sort of hoped that other people would feel like, if you're feeling something, you hope that everybody else is feeling the same way. But I think nothing really prepares you to see the level of response, the level of adoration, and it's just, you think you know what it will feel like, and then you actually see it, and it's the thinking and actually seeing it is something totally so I'm sort of rendered speechless sometimes when I just see the list of countries that it's number one.
How about you, Neil?
Oh, I echo completely what he's saying. Adeel, I don't know where you are at, but like in midlife, you've seen quite a bit and you've been through a lot of productions, and I walked away from it knowing in my heart of hearts that I thought it was solid all round. I knew that we brought as much as we possibly could considered work to the table, and I felt good about it walking away, right? But this kind of response, I could not have anticipated. No, it punched me out completely.
That's
I
great.
did not see this.
I wanted to ask you guys about working on the show during a real pandemic. Obviously, must have been pretty strange. Do you feel like you can pick apart like anything you might have done differently if you had filmed this in 2019, or is it too tangled up to know for sure? Adeel, how about you first?
I sort of feel like there's moments during the filming of it where we just sort of let the world in a little bit, and we were kind of responding to what was going on around the world, you know, and the depth of feeling that created when you're sort of acting in the scene, I think comes through in the whole of the sort of series itself. There's moments where you turn it on and you're sort of, I don't it's just so on point that you kind of, it's yeah, and that's because it mirrored what was going on in the world so well. So yeah.
I think I want to latch on to saying that I don't even want to get into the hypotheticals of if we shot it in a different time or any of those things. I just think really it was, if you talk about the perfect storm as a metaphor and all the variables that was involved and what we manifested, it could only have been exactly precisely that. Nothing else. It couldn't have existed, I don't think, 5 years prior or 5 years into the future. It was absolutely the right moment in time. Did we all know this? I don't think anybody did. How could you?
Right.
You know?
Neil, I wanted to ask you about comparing this maybe to the 100. This is your second big like post-apocalyptic show. Would you say if you yourself had to be trapped in a post-apocalyptic world, would you rather be stuck in Sweet Tooth or the 100?
The division bell. Look, let me go for Sweet Tooth because we all know how Titus met his end by his own blade, right? So in Sweet Tooth, as we end it, touch wood, I'm still breathing, so I'll choose that world for now.
Sounds good. All right, thank you guys so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Have you been surprised by the fan response to Sweet Tooth so far?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why, because I was in the dark about the whole thing. I mean, I knew it would be watched. I knew it's on Netflix. Price is Right. But you're blown away by the fact that it's 7 days now at #1. It's and I think it's going to hold for a while. It's because it has all the adventurous things of a good thriller. There's something in the future. There's something traditional about it, and it really is all about loving your neighbor and finding love in the end. It's resolved in a way that a lot of people are going to be very satisfied. And I always think about when we used to talk about a movie, we'd be leaving in the car and talk about the movie. Nobody kind of ever does that anymore, but I always love it. Like now when somebody calls you and said, I just saw a show you ought to see, that's the key, boy. If you call a friend and say, why don't you watch this? This is one of those, in other words. It's an 8-hour thing.
I was looking through your credits and I realized, I think this is your first comic book adaptation since Batman in 1967, which makes you uniquely qualified to tell us how the genre has changed. Does it feel like surprising because it's such a big, genre right now?
Yeah, it's certainly successful. It beats me. I have a son that collects, has piles of expensive collector comic books, and yet, to me, they were a dime, and you read them and throw them away, and like I'm old enough, where a Coke was a nickel,
Sure.
hello. Yeah. So, but I'm not one that can really like Josh has done Avengers, and he's done a couple of comic book things, right? But I'm the kind of person that would rather see him do No Country for Old Men or Old Boy,
Sure.
or some of his other, where he's a real character. It's totally different than anything you might conceive him doing.
Sure.
So I'm saying I'm more in that direction. I wasn't aware of Sweet Tooth when I tried to find a lot of, and they didn't want me to know much about it because I might talk in advance about what it was about. So I found out a lot last Friday when everybody else saw the 8 hours like I did. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So have you read ahead now, or are you still trying to avoid it?
Read ahead. They still won't give me a script. I guess I could ask them, but now I've seen all 8 hours,
Okay.
Last Friday, I mean, we just binged and we went to bed when the sun was coming up. And
awesome.
and loved it. I mean, it leaves you with a nice warm feeling after a lot of treachery,
Yeah. And so obviously it ends on a pretty strong cliffhanger in a couple places. Are you?
Yeah.
You're feeling confident about a renewal, or?
I don't know, and I actually haven't asked where they had. I'm sure it's come up before they even shot, but sure. I have not asked that question. And with the way it is, I know that anybody smart knows that the public wants to see a bit more of it. That's my take on it. So definitely. Why not? There's always a writer's way to rejuvenate anything that may have been lost. Like some movies fold and finish and all the main characters are dead and everything, but they find a way to make it work. And my hunch is they will. That's just my hunch.
Cool. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So with that, you said, you mentioned the shooting. Did you travel to New Zealand, or as the narrator, did you get to work from home?
I didn't. They wanted me to know as little as possible. I could, that's not unusual. You get a ticket to New Zealand and you record everything over a week and you have a good time. But no, it's lucky they were able to shoot in New Zealand during the COVID shutdown. That was one of the places that was fairly safe. And with me, they brought a portable studio over here 8 times, and I recorded here, and then it folded up and was picked up an hour after I finished each session. And each session was 2 to 4 hours, basically.
That's convenient. I love that.
Yeah. And the thing that it ended up sounding terrific. Yeah, and definitely. Once I was on it, on the earphones, I'm talking to the director and all the sound guys over at Warner's 50 miles away. And I've got the video picture in the box, in the setup they sent me, and watching the clips as I'm talking. And then sometimes I try to do it to the picture or the action. Sometimes I just said, let me do a variation of that line 20 times, just on my own. You guys just go have coffee, and I'm just going to, and then you can listen to it later and pick out what
that's
you
the
might
way to
want.
work.
Yeah. And then, and the director would go, well, that's not what I had in mind. I said, just let me do it and come back, and they go, oh, that's a good idea.
I love that. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Okay, Michael. Yeah. Good seeing you, man.
Thank you guys for talking to me today.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask, I guess to start, has anything about the fan response so far surprised you guys?
Everything.
The scale of it is just, making comics. I have a pretty large readership in comics, but that compared to like a mass television audience, the scale is so different. It's kind of mind-boggling. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And sorry. I was just going to say I worked in television for a very long time, and this is the largest scope of kind of audience interaction I've ever experienced.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things from the conversations online has been people comparing show Bobby to comics Bobby and kind of being surprised by what they see. Did you guys predict that? Was that on purpose or?
We didn't predict much about Bobby.
No, he was a journey.
He was a journey. And there were early conversations of like, do we just write him out of the show? How do we work him into the show? No, I think, my partner, Nick D'Amici, kind of early on had almost a joke passingly, of like, kind of building him, just having him be a full-on puppet. Because we had tried to work on what a human version of that would look like, and it was terrifying. It was like a werewolf with buck teeth. It was horrifying. And so we started talking about what that would look like as a puppet, and we sort of pitched it to Fractured Effects, and they got on board and went fully into that. And it was really enjoyable because it really kind of went to the sort of Jim Henson throwback kind of feel of some of the world building. So I love it. What I loved is just seeing how much people just instantly respond to him,
Yeah.
Every once in a while, people in horror, but for the most part, people just falling in love with him, which is cool.
I also think early on, we made a decision that he has to be cute, because we did go through some versions where he was not as cute. And I know a lot of us use our children as a barometer. Like, I have a 2-year-old son now, and even when he was younger, I would put him in front of the screen and he just like melted when he saw Bobby. So I think that was something we kind of, we figured out as we were going along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they love a mascot on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
The horror elements in general, they creep up on you throughout the show. Was that, and that's also the case in the comic, I guess. Is that like a difficult balance to strike? Was it intentional that it would be kind of sneaky that way?
Good question.
I don't think it was intentionally sneaky. I think we knew we had to balance both of those things. We had Gus, who sees everything through rose-colored glasses, and then we have Rockridge, where we burn people alive. So we knew we had that balance. And I know Jim and I had discussed, like, is this going to work? That we're going to, and we had a group of teenagers who we wanted to murder people. We didn't want to water them down at all. But we still love them, for who they are. So I think we were probably pleasantly surprised at how well it came out in the cuts, those transitions, and that we didn't actually have to work too hard to make it all fit in an episode and not feel too, back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And I've spent a lot of time doing horror movies and have loved that. And as time has evolved, so I think learning the rhythms of setups and payoffs, and sort of, not just being able to pull your audience in so that by the time they get close, that's when you can sneak up on them. And I think that winds up sort of finding itself in everything. Even a lot of the visuals and sort of the camera work and stuff like that is still motivated by a lot of that horror film language, which I think is fun in a story like this.
Yeah, I kind of like how in a way, the comic and the show are kind of inverted, where like, in the comic, the horror sci-fi stuff is a little more in your face, and the heart kind of sneaks up on you. And in the show, it's like it's the kind of the heart and the character stuff are up front, and then the horror is sneaky. Yeah. Cool. That way. It works well, I think, for the different mediums.
That's such a good way to put it. That's exactly what it is. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.